From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. I've been thinking recently we need to get back to our roots a little bit. If you're a new listener, or maybe you forgot, maybe I need to remind you. We are anarchists over here, social anarchists. So it's kind of funny when we talk about anti-Orange Menace stuff. A lot of it comes from the traditional American left, or what they call the left, liberals, progressives, Democrats, lots of different ways to think about them, lots of different labels to give them. But we get so caught up in the fact that the Orange Menace really is so existentially dangerous that we forget we oppose what's called the American left almost as much as we oppose the Orange Menace. We get painted into the same corner. Because, as I've said many times, we have to form a coalition in rebellion to the regime. Yeah, I'm all for that coalition. But I feel the need that we have to remind ourselves once in a while, that's not the agenda we want, though. Once we win, we have big ideas that the so-called American left don't share. Anyway. Let's just keep that in mind as we have our little conversation today. Let's see. Start, as we always do, boycotts and strikes, etc. We are in the midst, this is the biggest one, of course, we're in the midst of two major boycotts. This week, May 5th and 6th through the 11th and 12th, we are boycotting all things Meta, that's Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, Messenger, and Threads. So this episode will not be shared on Facebook and on Threads as it usually is. It will be shared on Substack and Blue Sky. So come and find me over there, Substack and Blue Sky, at Charles Purcell. And we're also boycotting Amazon because they're a big evil corporation and Bezos is a tool who exploits his workers, engages in wage theft, horrible for the environment. He's taken this recent political turn to be part of the Orange Menace Tech Bro Club. He's turned the Washington Post editorial board into a spineless, feckless, mealy-mouthed nothing burger. So, Amazon. We're boycotting Amazon forever, please. All right, what's going on out there? Airplanes, panic, public infrastructure. Okay, so April 28th, 2025, Newark Liberty International Airport. Reports of at least 15 up to 20 planes suddenly lose all communication with air traffic controllers. No radar, no radio. Reports say for a full 30 up to 90 seconds, the people in the tower couldn't see, hear, or talk to the aircraft. This went black. Frightening. Just a very tense situation. Luckily, no crashes because of that blackout. But hundreds of delays, cancellations, and this weird detail of the story that several air traffic controllers are on trauma leave because it's become so out of hand. And you might wonder why. Well, airports are part of the public infrastructure, and they've had no attention for decades. Now, there was the big Biden infrastructure bill. Remember that? It passed his first year in office, 2021. From that multi-billion-dollar funding, $30 million were earmarked for Newark Airport. And improvements are starting to happen as we speak, but these things take time. Maybe if the administration before Biden had passed an infrastructure bill like they kept promising, we'd have some things done by now. And maybe if the administration after Biden hadn't come in and started freezing funds and trying to claw back money, writing executive orders to pause the disbursement of billions of dollars of infrastructure, transportation. Yeah. So what other essential infrastructure is going to come tumbling down? And some of the improvements in that infrastructure bill, the Biden bill, are happening as we speak and will be happening over the next year or two. But the current regime has to do something, and I don't know how the hell they do anything for the public good, given their current stand on spending. Not to mention dodgy, the Musk fever dream slashing of the FAA slashed staff by 400. Now, they didn't slash controllers or inspectors, but they did slash a bunch of support folks who keep the gears turning, maintenance, administration, safety. So yeah, let's slow roll any improvements that were happening. So we wonder why safety and efficiency are at risk. This is crazy. Is this part of their big plan to privatize literally everything? Do they want to privatize airports too? Airports across the country need money. They're outdated. Their equipment is outdated. Their technology is outdated. So is that part of the plan? To let it all fall apart so the oligarchs can sweep in? Hedge funds can go in and buy airports like they buy toy store chains? Yeah, let's just privatize everything. Airports, bridges, roads, public education. You know, some things just have to be public. The private market doesn't work in some areas. Two areas where we keep expecting it to work and it's never going to: housing and healthcare. So there again, just another little reminder of where we are. We're social anarchists here. Money and profit need to be abolished. Because what we have now is this arms race. On one side of the arms race is the for-profit private market. And they're doing everything they can to increase their profits. That's what they do. That's what they're supposed to do. In fact, companies that are public and have boards of directors and trade on the public stock market are legally obligated to create as much profit as they possibly can. That's the law. That's how it's set up. So that's one side of the ledger. Every ledger has two sides. So what's on the other side of that ledger? Well, government regulation. Only the most unhinged right-wing radical thinks that all regulation should be gone, that private corporations should be 100% free to do whatever they want to maximize their profits without regard to any regulations, safety regulations, labor, health, environmental. Just scrap it all? Of course not. So then we have this age-old fight of where to draw the line. Well, you can't have too much regulation, but then again, you have to have some regulation, and it becomes this little game we play. But here's the problem. It's not a matter of finding the right sort of, Goldilocks solution. Oh, it's too hot. Oh, it's too cold. Oh, it's just right. No, there's no Goldilocks situation. It's the relationship itself. This arms race between regulation and profit that will never work. Regulation will never win the arms race against profit. Not now, not ever. Because for every regulation, the profit makers find a way. They find a new way to either get around it, invent something new. And when they do, then the regulators have to step back in and they have to up their game. And that's why I use the metaphor of the arms race, because that's exactly what it is. The profiteers step up their game. The regulators have to step up their game. It keeps going and going in this endless cycle. And then people wonder why the government is so large and inefficient. Because they have to continually try to keep up with the new financial innovations of the private market. It's a lose-lose for everybody, except, of course, the oligarchs who get their cut no matter what happens. But we have to end the arms race. We have to end the arms race itself. And it's only getting worse now. With AI breathing down our neck, and God knows what's going to happen in that sector over the next year or 10 or 20 years. With the absolute crisis we have in information technology, in news media, the corruption, with the climate crisis breathing down our neck. And all the while, we got this fascist regime doing everything it can to exploit the situation. So who in their right mind thinks that we can continue with old school thinking that, if we just pass sufficient regulatory legislation, we'll be okay. We can control AI. We can control this runaway train of profit. We can continue to rely on consumer consumption to drive our economy. We can continue to have endless growth and somehow at the same time regulate AI, somehow regulate our way out of a climate collapse, somehow regulate our way out of a completely failed news media infrastructure. We can regulate our way out of burgeoning fascism. Who thinks that? Who thinks that somehow reasonable, practical, middle-of-the-road, capital D Democratic centrists can write regulatory legislation that will save us from these attacks? Can we just get serious for a second here? Raise your hand if you believe that. I dare you. So that's why I mentioned at the top, we got to get back to our main mission here. And I've only got a handful of friends out there. I know we're very much alone in this thinking. But we have to defeat money and profit itself. We have to get past a system that relies at its very heart, a system that is defined almost exclusively, entirely by the central idea that growth is infinite, that consumption has to increase, the GDP has to grow, and that the engine that drives the whole thing is private profit. It's insane. And if you agree with me, if you think I make any sense, well, you and I are a very small minority. It's you and me and a handful of friends out there. Because even the likes of Bernie and AOC, the farthest left you can find in Congress, every single last one of them believes in economic growth. They believe in private profit. They want to have all these public-private partnerships. That's what Democratic bills, the infrastructure bill, the health care bill, all of them, down through the years. It's all about incentivizing private profiteers to do good things. They think they can engineer the world using private profit as the only tool. Well, we can get everybody health care if we just incentivize private health insurers, if they can make lots of money doing it. We can have a healthy environment, and we could end the climate crisis if we incentivize for-profit energy producers and for-profit manufacturers, housing construction. If we can promise them all these profits, then they'll do the right thing. How dumb do you have to be to believe that, given our track record? No, it's the profit itself that has to go. It's the money itself that has to go. And the added benefit to this way of thinking, it's also the only way to defeat the current global fascist momentum. Everybody wants the same thing. They want to be able to take care of their families. They want to work at some sort of job that has some sort of purpose and meaning. And they want to have the wherewithal, the ability to have a decent house, to live in a safe neighborhood, to have their basic material needs met. Food, education, transportation, a little leisure time once in a while. People want solutions. The closest we've ever come to achieving this, at least here in the United States, was during a very brief window, that sort of post-war 50s, 60s kind of era, where it really did work for a lot of people, a lot of white people. And somehow, the owners of the big corporations got along fine. But then comes the civil rights movement, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, the most important legislation in the history of the nation. We have the women's rights movement, allowing women to have jobs and careers, to have their own bank accounts, which they literally couldn't have in some places up through the 1970s. They couldn't even have their own credit card. So we had this beautiful sort of middle-class dream just prior to that, prior to the Civil Rights era, prior to the women's movement, when one salary could support a household, could have the house, could have the car, could have the vacation, could have the fund for the kids' college education, could have the annual vacation, could have a lot of nice presents under the Christmas tree. A lot of people had this. A lot of people. But it was dependent on the exclusion of most people of color. It was dependent on the free labor of exploited women. And when those walls started breaking down, the system somehow just didn't translate. The money guys weren't having it. If in the 50s and 60s, for a white family, one salary could support the household, why wasn't that still the same in the 80s, 90s, and today? Why is that? Why, when civil rights laws came into place, desegregating education, employment opportunities, housing, getting rid of the redlining, all the great accomplishments of the civil rights era, all the great accomplishments of women's rights, of LGBTQ rights, now suddenly because people have rights, now it takes 2 incomes to support a household? When the government steps in its rightful role to protect its citizens against discrimination, to regulate against safety hazards, now for some reason, all of a sudden, that one breadwinner can't support a household. And then 2 breadwinners can't support a household. Government rules and regulations, the most noble of them all, to protect civil rights, to protect health and safety of food, of water, to protect the earth. The most vital and fundamental roles of a collective government will always be at odds with those who seek profit. It's an adversarial relationship, not a natural one, no. It's an adversarial relationship artificially constructed by a system that centers profit. Get rid of the profit. It's the only way. Now imagine the alternative. I'm going to say something now that sounds insane to you, but just think of it as a thought experiment for now. Okay, I want you to imagine a world without money, without profit. Imagine an entrepreneur, which is something that everybody admires. People on the right, people on the left, they love an entrepreneur. Well, what would an entrepreneur do if money was no longer the driving force, the incentive? Would they sit home? Would they sit home and watch The View and soap operas and just do nothing all day? Would they just sit back in their recliner? Well, no. They would go out and make every attempt to achieve their goals, just like they do now. Inventors, innovators, entrepreneurs, they don't do what they do to make money. Now, all of us work to make money because that's the system that we've been given. But I'm asking you to imagine a world where there is no money. If you need food, you go to the store, you get what you need. The people who grow the food and the people who package the food have done their job because, well, that's just what they do. They've decided that's how they want to live in the world. That's how they want to contribute to the world. What would you do every day when you got up if you weren't forced to go to a job that you didn't want to do? Which the research tells us is the majority of Americans. I don't know how many exactly, but when they do the surveys, when they do the research on this, it's well over half of people who say, no, they probably wouldn't do what they're doing now if they had a choice. They're only doing what they have to do because they have no choice. They have to make money. Imagine a world where you could just go online and see in a couple of clicks what kind of work out there needs to be done. Where are people needed to grow food, to work in air traffic control towers? Where are people needed in healthcare facilities, in hospitals? How many teachers are needed in Texas? How many teachers are needed in Hawaii? Then you just go do it. If you don't have the training, you'd go to school, which would also be free because everything is free. Nothing that much really changes from the kind of world we're used to, at least when it comes to essential work, the work that really needs to be done. We would have universities, we would have factories, we would have hospitals, we would have schools, we would have farms and grocery stores, hardware stores. We'd have what we needed. And you as an individual would just get up and decide what you want to do. How do you want to serve? Now, why is that crazy? Well, it's not crazy. Well, most people won't do anything. No, why do you think that? There's absolutely no reason to believe that. I don't believe that for a second. Everybody wants to do something. They want to work. They want to achieve things. They want to contribute to society. Well, sure, everybody would just, be musicians. Fine, we'd have more musicians. Nobody would pick up the garbage. Well, of course they would. Why wouldn't they? So if you believe that, do you believe that all of those jobs, low-level burger flippers and administrative assistants, and you think all of those people are forced to do those jobs for fear of not being able to feed their families? And if that's the truth, what kind of a system is that? Where we have to just strike fear into people's hearts in order for the world to work, in order for us to have what we need. If everybody got up and did exactly what they wanted to do every day, we would have everything we need. The entire financial industry, brokers, bankers, hedge fund operators, investors, they'd be in the history books. They wouldn't exist anymore. Insurance companies wouldn't exist. We would have no shortages of teachers, farmers, grocers, all the essential work. We'd have no shortage. We'd all take care of each other. Healthcare, my God, one of the greatest shortages of all, the healthcare industry. Elders need care. Kids need care. Instead of one teacher and 40 kids in a classroom, we'd have a ratio of one teacher for every 5 or 6 kids. We'd still have everything we need. Convince me that we wouldn't. There wouldn't be rich people. There wouldn't be poor people. There'd just be people. Everyone would have a fine education. Everyone would have fine nutrition. Instead of one militarized cop for every 10,000 citizens, you'd have dozens of safety monitors on every block. We'd all be looking out for each other, taking care of each other. What possible motive would there be for crime when you have everything you need? What motivation would you have to accumulate more than your neighbor? It would just be ridiculous. It would be frowned upon. And more than that, it would just be absurd. Why in the world would you hoard anything? It would make no sense. It would be a sign of insanity, for which there would be plenty of care. We're currently in an arms race between well-intentioned government regulators and the madness of eternal and ever-increasing profit. And I say end the arms race. Take away the profit. You can take away most of the regulation. You libertarians out there, you old-school conservatives, you hate government regulation, you hate all the laws, you hate all the red tape. Most of it goes away. Because what private company would destroy the planet if they had no financial incentive to do so? Why would they do that? Why would they pollute the air and the water? For the fun of it? Yeah, we got to get back to basics here on the log. We got to get back to abolishing borders, abolishing money, abolishing profit. We got to get back to social anarchism, where we have very little use for government power, where small d democracy is everywhere. It permeates all of our lives. When we get together to do work, to make things, to grow food, to distribute that food, when we get together in groups to meet one another's need for goods and services, We do it under our own free will and with small d democracy permeating everything we do. We don't need leaders. We don't need bosses. Anybody who's ever worked in any situation, you name it, you know how useless your manager is. You know how useless your boss is. Anybody who's worked knows this. And to bring this all back to our current situation, it's the only alternative bold enough to defeat the authoritarian fascist promise to rule with an iron fist, with all these promises of law and order, these promises to silence or suppress or to even kill the enemies they've invented. Fascism is a powerful movement that attracts the people who are most vulnerable and most afraid. And those very same people, the most vulnerable, the most afraid, are the very people who will find their wealth, find their freedom, find their power, find their autonomy in social anarchism, where we destroy forever the very idea of kings, of leaders, of millionaires and billionaires and bosses. This is the most we the people political philosophy imaginable. And if you think it's unrealistic, if you think it can't happen, I want you to tell me why. Articulate the reasons why this can't work. I can give you 100 reasons why it'll be resisted. I can give you 100 reasons why the powers that be hate the idea. Sure, that I get. But tell me why the system itself wouldn't work. Tell me what we wouldn't have. Tell me how we lose with bosses and billionaires in the rearview mirror of history, and with each one of us in charge of our own destiny, working together democratically. Yeah, I agree with you. The powers that be will fight it. Of course they will. I agree with you. It won't be easy to achieve. But you can't tell me that the system itself wouldn't work. I don't know how you tell me that. Fascism is a worldwide movement. It's a powerful movement. The only way we defeat it is with a movement that is equally powerful and diametrically opposed. The continuation of the for-profit system with well-intentioned regulators and administrators is not a solution. It's a death trap. All right, we'll continue to explore these ideas as we fight the current fascist regime. Find this on all your favorite podcast platforms, at the website, charlespurcell.com. Remember, we're boycotting Amazon this week. We're boycotting all things Meta. That includes Facebook and Threads, where this episode would normally post. Instead, from now on, go see me over at Substack and Blue Sky at Charles Purcell. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio, riverwestradio.com. Peter Donalds wrote and performed the theme song. All right, I love you. See you out there.